please rise in body or in spirit for the reading of the gospel. The reading is from Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. You may be seated.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
These 3 short verses begin a 4-part teaching about money and how it can consume our attention, our energies, and even our well-being if we're not careful. Now, this teaching comes right in the middle of these 3 chapters in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, called the Sermon on the Mount. They're a chapter after the Beatitudes. Those are the blessed are statements. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the peacemakers. And they're directly following Jesus' teachings on prayer, including his instruction about the Lord's Prayer. This is to say, this short teaching on where we store our treasure and how that relates to our heart is at the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, which is the heart of Jesus' teachings to his disciples about what it means to follow him. That is to say, these verses are of central importance. Thanks to social scientist and researcher Brené Brown, I can no longer hear the word heart without also thinking of the word courage. She reminds us that courage comes from the Latin word cor, C-O-R, meaning heart. And when courage first came to the English language, the original definition was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. Now, over time, this definition has changed, and now courage is more synonymous with being heroic, which we think about on weekends like this one, Veterans Day weekend, and we certainly need our brave heroes. But Brown says that ordinary courage is about putting our vulnerability on the line every day. Speaking honestly and openly about who we are and what we are feeling is the definition of courage, of heart work, or we might say of heart wellness. Now, I know that talking about money is vulnerable for many, if not all of us. I know it's even extremely uncomfortable for some of you, and maybe even traumatic, especially hearing about money in the church. So just sitting through stewardship season, showing up here in the pews or online, that can be an act of courage. Just as it is an act of courage to go to a financial planner and say, I'm in debt and I need help, right? When we talk about money, it speaks of something related to our hearts, and that's why it is vulnerable. That's what Jesus is trying to clue us into in this teaching. And I think it's because we live in a society where earning money and exchanging money is necessary for survival, right? So it takes courage to speak about the thing which our lives literally depend upon, right? And of course, we live in the world we live in. Money is not bad per se. It is what it is. Without money, we can't pay our rent. Without money, we don't have health insurance. Without money, we cannot provide for our families. Without money, we could be trapped in systems that don't have our best interests at heart. And this is why we protect money so closely. It's precious to us because we've been taught in very real ways that without money, we're nothing and we cannot survive. And not only that, we've been taught that money is private and it's a personal thing and we're all on our own when it comes to making it in the world. There's a fierce independence in our country about gathering and keeping resources, even taking resources, that runs contrary to the very nature of how we are created, from a biblical perspective at least. May I remind you that we were created as stewards of this earth. That is, we were created and called to be people that do not claim resources for ourselves, but rather care for this great earth and all the resources and creatures on it as if they are gifts from God, because they are, and as if we are meant to share them because we are. We're created in community for community. God didn't create one person but two. God didn't just create humans but all kinds of creatures. And at our very essence, we are generative creatures of a generative God. Think about it. God created the world in a way that works by multiplying, right? We are co-creators. We gain more when we share with one another, when we're in relationship with each other, when everyone and everything is seen as God's beloved creation. In fact, when we stop generating, when we stop giving and sharing, we die. Not just individually, but as a species. It's evolution 101. So generating and creating more through sharing and giving, that's the core of who we are, spiritually speaking. At the heart of our humanity is a spirit of generosity, and we can't do anything about it. We can't get rid of it. It is in us. And yet here we are living in a world where generosity is now deemed a quality that some people have and other people do not. It's a trait that seems to depend upon how much money you make and how much you give away, rather than being a trait that's celebrated as a core part of each one of our identities. So I think talking about money is so hard because we're talking about something that is the thing that often keeps us from living who we are at the core of our being. Money becomes this litmus test, this barrier to what it means to be generous, when in reality, I want to say to you today, Calvary, each and every one of us is generous. No matter how much money you make or have to your name, because you are created in the image of God, and God is a generous God, you too are generous. Look at the patterns in creation. Look at how the trees produce fruit year after year. Look at how nature provides for itself. This amazing interconnected web and ecology of resources, despite what we humans do to it. To be alive is to give. To be alive is to receive. Of course, we talk in the church about giving of our time and talent and money, but also just think about the fact that we exhale carbon dioxide into the world every day. Trees take that in, and guess what? They exhale oxygen back to us. We give and receive with creation. Think about what a woman gives with her body when she grows a tiny human within it, literally sharing her nutrients with somebody else. Think of teachers, coaches, directors, mentors who share knowledge freely without reservation. Think of prayers, cards, kind words that you share with those in this community that are hurting or going through a hard time. You say, I'm with you. You don't have to do this alone. These are generous, generative actions. They connect us more deeply. They create more love, more life in the world. When we give, we create together. And that's the key word, together. We cannot give if no one is there to receive. We cannot receive if someone else does not give. It takes community. We're children of a generative God, which makes us generous beyond our wildest dreams. The question is, are we living fully into this generous and generative identity, or has it become hidden away within us? Maybe it's hibernating until the right season. Maybe it's cowering behind our fear of not being prepared for the future, our anxiety about what tomorrow might bring, our worry about not having enough. Maybe we're leaning too much into receiving because we feel we're owed something in the world, or we've worked hard to, quote, earn something. Sometimes I wonder if we really mean what we say when we pray, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Have you ever thought about this? To believe this means that we're saying in the kingdom of God, there is actually no owing. Whatever we might earn is to be spent on our daily bread, not just our daily bread, but the daily bread of everybody else. Not necessarily for us to save for the bread that we might need in the future. Jesus knows that we draw these protective barriers around ourselves because we think that by protecting our resources and our stuff, that we'll be okay, that we'll be safe, whatever that means in the future, secure. And there is nothing wrong with that because it's very human. We're taught to fear what tomorrow might bring. We hold on to what we have tightly. And that becomes a problem because when we hold on to what we have tightly, we're putting our heart and our energies into that tightly holding as well. And it's a surefire way for our heart to get broken because our stuff is never secure. Have you ever thought about that the more money you have, it's just going to hurt that much more when the stock market crashes, right? You lose more. You have more stuff and a thief comes in and takes it. That's just more stuff for them to take. I mean, it's this zero-sum game that's crazy when you think about it. This text is asking us, are we worrying about whether we have enough money? Are we working really hard to make more money? Are we saving all the money we have for a, quote, rainy day? And if so, we might be doing one or all of those things. Is that where we want our heart to be? Is that where we want our energy and our attention and the core of our lives to be, in that worry, in that making, in that saving? Or do we want our heart to be in the qualities that Jesus is teaching about in the Sermon on the Mount? Do we want our heart to be with the poor, the mourning, the persecuted, the peacemakers? Do we want our heart to be where our priorities and values are? If so, what are those values? Is it community? Is it faith? Is it justice, advocacy, making a difference in the world? Is it having a sacred place to come and worship, a place to learn and grow? Is it your family? Is it your church family? At the end of the day, if everything else is stripped away, where is your heart? Where is your attention and focus? What matters the most? And get ready, here's the kicker. Jesus says we figure out what matters most by looking at where our money is, where our treasure is. And this is the powerful and really annoying thing about this text. Jesus does not say, where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. Because we all have good intentions about where our heart should be. We want our heart to be in the right places. Every single one of us would say we care about the poor. But if our actions are not aligned with our values, then what are we doing to help the poor? Good intentions do not feed people. Generous giving, communal sharing does. And there's good news in here because we're in this together. We don't have to do it alone. And that's the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount, of gathering these disciples in community and saying, look at one another. We are in relationship to and with each other. This is not meant to be a guilt-inducing exercise from Jesus. I think it's Jesus saying, look, I'm giving you a tool. In the same way I say, if you don't know how to pray, here's an example of a prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. If you don't really know what you value or what's most important, take a look at your checkbook. Look at where you put your money, and that will clue you in. It's an invitation from Jesus, not an accusation. In fact, the very next section after this section on money says, do not judge so that you may not be judged. Jesus is not judging us or guilting us. Jesus is inviting us, I think, into a practice where we can feel more aligned with what we value, where we can live a bit more lightly because we're gripping our stuff more loosely, which allows us to love God and love others more boldly. So view this text as an invitation to examine your life, to look at your values and your priorities and say, is that where my treasure is? Where we hold our treasure, it reveals what has a hold of our heart. He's quite brilliant in making this connection. And there's research done on this. There's a guy named Robert Frank who studies the lives of the uber rich and famous. I'm talking rich of the rich of the rich. In fact, he calls these communities Richistan communities. And he actually studied their mental health and their anxieties, and he went to them because they were all not doing well. And he said, well, how much money would you need to feel financially secure? Because that was their worry. Do you know that the people who had $1 million said they needed another $1 million to feel secure? The people who had 10 million said they needed 10 million to feel secure. The people who had 100 million to their name and net worth said that if they had another 100 million, then they might feel secure. All of this proves Jesus' point that wealth guarantees no ultimate fulfillment or security. In a world of moths and rust and thieves, not to mention a roller coaster stock market, volatile housing prices, corporate downsizing and outsourcing, there is always going to be anxiety out there about how much money you have or don't. None of us apparently, is ever going to be satisfied with how much stuff we have. It's kind of depressing, isn't it? Like you can't earn your way to satisfaction, friends. And that's the lesson, isn't it? The scarcity feeling that we all feel at times does not go away when we get more stuff. No amount of money will fix that feeling. The scarcity feeling only goes away, according to Jesus, when we stop focusing on our stuff as the metric for what makes us feel like we have enough, and we just focus on being enough in who we are, in trusting that God is enough, and because God is enough, we are too. Now, I know that sounds churchy, that sounds cliche, that sounds like a pastor up in a pulpit telling you something that's too easy to say, but hard to live. But having more money in your bank account, that's not going to take away the fear and sadness you feel about the war and genocide that's going on. Think about the things that make your heart ache and your soul hurt. More money is not going to take that away. That's going to be there, but what fills that hole, what fills that sadness, that lament, that grief is when we can co-create and share and generate and give what we have, when we focus on what God has given us to share and not focus on what we don't have. To be well is always about our collective wellness, not just the wellness of you or me as an individual. The truth is, what I want us to think about today is not whether you can give more money to support this church. I know, shocker. Some of us can give more money, some of us can't, right? The question is, what makes your heart full? What will allow you to say, it is well with my heart? Where are you putting your treasure, your value, your investment? Because our wellness is connected to where we put our money, our resources, our time, our energy, our passion. And the same way where it's like really depressing that we're never, gonna have enough, that we stop wanting more, that depressing thought. That may be true, but you know what also is true? Whether you have a ton of money or no money, giving always feels good. Has anybody ever given and been like, yeah, I wish I hadn't done that? No, giving feels good because it's core to who we are. And Calvary, you are a community that continually teaches me how much more generous I can be. Damon and I, we increase our pledge every year, and we've never had a year where we're like, yeah, shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. No, the opposite is true. We continue to increase our giving because we see the work of God through you, Calvary, through us. We feel more aligned with our values and priorities. We see the ways that our giving is transforming lives. And yes, the money we give is somewhat transactional on some levels. It keeps the lights on, it pays my salary. We get that. But it's not just transactional. It's transformational when you look at the ministry that God is doing through this place as the lights are on. Each and every day, people are changed through Calvary. People heal in our pews from hurtful theology. People find community and connection in our small groups. People experience shelter and hospitality through Family Promise. People have a sacred place to remember their loved ones in the foot of the cross courtyard. Children are welcomed and learn to sing with their full voices here on these steps. Musicians have an avenue to share your gifts through the choir. You get to make a difference in whatever ways you serve this community, Calvary. You're part of a community. That is such good news, because community is not a commodity that can be bought or sold for any price. and neither is faith, but both can be treasured. Today, on Commitment Sunday, we have the opportunity for our treasure to tell the story of what we value most to the world. Today, our collective treasure will reveal what we believe to be the heart of God's call for Calvary next year and beyond. And I hope we all believe that it's beyond our wildest dreams. Amen.